For many gamers, Batman Arkham City has long since been put to bed, even if you spent the time to complete all the optional and downloadable content. So it comes as a surprise to see Warner Bros. And NetherRealm Studios dropping a mini prequel to their console title this late in the proceedings. But fans like myself aren't going to look down on what is essentially a late gift, or is that an early Christmas present? Unfortunately, the timing of the game isn't terribly opportune, as its gameplay, much like its game engine, falls into the same category as Infinity Blade and its ilk. You, as Batman, take on miniature missions beating down a sequence of bad guys, dodging, countering, and punching them in turn until their boss deems you worthy enough for direct combat. Once you clear the board and recapture the Joker, you start from the beginning with slightly harder foes. It's a shame the formula is so rote and simplistic, especially when the game is set between the two major console titles, and there's little to no story to speak of to motivate Batman's actions. It's literally the baddies have escaped the asylum, go round them up. Where combat with each villain's minions feels like a permanent case of deja vu, taking on the head honchos is another thing altogether, as their scripted fights often require adaptations to your style of combat to succeed. Grundy, for example, requires speed execution of dodges before you can clock him in the jaw, while Deathstroke plays as a deadly back-and-forth game with Batman that requires perfect execution to succeed. At first, it's hard to complain about the combat, especially when it's presented in such high definition, acting as almost a miniaturized version of the full game. However, this comes at a price. Firstly, I almost burned my hand on my iPhone 4S, something that hasn't happened in a long time. But more importantly, the amount of actual combat animations is woefully small, making combat all the more monotonous as a result. The compensation for beating people in the face comes in the form of Wayne Tech points, which can be spent on gadgets and general upgrades to add some personality to the combat. But for the most part, they're florid extras that add no real complexity to the combat. Costumes can also be purchased for a price, changing Batman's base statistics for health, combat, and speed, but aside from this, it's simply an aesthetic change. For an action game based on a title with smooth, flawless multi-target combat, Arkham City Lockdown comes off as a rather drab showing of a handful of uninspired minions punctuated occasionally by interesting, but otherwise storyless combat sequences with Batman's rogues gallery. It's a pretty game, and one that's worth playing through at least once, but it's hard to justify coming back for more.
More! Bravo!
This has been Andrew with AppSpy.com. We review, you decide.